Imagine buying clothes for your children. Opinions can be all over the place. Now imagine buying clothes for your children with disabilities who are better served with adaptive clothing. It's one thing to not know where to shop for your daughter, who may be taller than the average girl, or your son, whose feet are bigger than the average. But where do you go to purchase clothes for your child who has a G tube? Sasha Radwan has filled that gap with her company, Special Kids.Company. She leveraged both her corporate and personal background to address a particular shopping market that had gone unaddressed for far too long. That interview is coming up next. Hi, and welcome to the show. I am speaking today with Sasha Radwan, the CEO and founder of Special Kids.Company. Sasha, thanks for being here today.
Hi, Jennifer. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, sure. So I want to talk about your company and also yourself, and just get start out with a little bit of background information. Your clothes rather, or your store for selling adaptive clothing is for people with special needs, specifically kids with special needs. However, I read that your background did not lend itself to kids with special needs through personal experience, meaning you don't, if I understand correctly, you don't necessarily have a child with special needs, but you still landed in this area. So I'm just curious if you could talk a little bit more about how you got into, selling clothes for kids with special needs.
Yeah, no, sure. Happy to go through it. So I'm originally from Australia to Egyptian parents, and my background is actually in engineering. So I've lived and traveled across the world in different projects. But the last assignment I was on, I lived in the Middle East, and over there I did see a lot of children with various conditions, and we specialize mostly with children who have social disabilities rather than physical disabilities. But what happened is, when I lived in the Middle East, there were lots of residential areas where these children were essentially hidden away from society. I, in fact, lived next door to a special needs compound, and I never saw anybody go in or out from the compound, and I thought that was quite concerning. And it was a time in my life where I wanted to change my career. So I took some time off and I traveled, and I thought, well, what do I want to do? And I wanted two things: something that linked me back into the Middle East, and something that made a difference to society. So I did notice that there were a few companies that sold what's called adaptive clothing. So it's adapted for children with special needs, but there wasn't one company that any parent that came to mind to a parent and said, look, I've got a child with special needs. Where do I go? So most times if you have a neurotypical child, you know where to buy shoes and clothes and all the equipment that need it. But there isn't a company that comes to mind that says, yep, if I've got a child with special needs, I'll go there. You often tend to find that a child gets a diagnosis, but then are left to their own devices to find the resources and products that they need. So it was out of that Special Kids was born out of. The second thing is that in that journey, I did find out that I had a distant relative who, we're talking about in Egypt, and we're going back to 1930s, that did have a social disability. To date, nobody in the family wants to talk about it, so it's difficult for me to find more information. But what I do know is that she was in her late teens. She was institutionalized and essentially hidden away from society, which is exactly what I saw happen in the compound. So that's why the tagline for the company is where every child should be seen and not hidden. Mm-hmm. So that's how the business came about. How do I reach these people and the children? And the thing is I come from a corporate background, so it was about creating an international company where I could serve more parents than just within a small community.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to follow up on your background, or a couple of different things that you mentioned about your background and family history, you are Middle Eastern but you grew up in Australia. So what was that like, and how did that shape you? I'm assuming it did shape you as a person,
Yeah.
and then an adult, and how was that? How did that shape you?
Yeah, as a kid, you want to fit in, right?
Yeah.
So growing up, and I grew up mostly in an Australian community, not so much a multicultural community. So being able to identify where I fit in was difficult. It had its challenges. So as I got older and understood my own culture as well as the Australian culture, for me, it then, turned that difficult challenge more into a strength, because now I'm able to bridge cultural gaps. So I understand the different cultural needs of different societies, and for me, and I'm able to then put that out to other cultures outside of my own. So it's something that I was able to embrace and learn and recognize, that's why this culture would do it that way as opposed to the way another culture did it. So, and then I've lived in 5 different countries as well, so that keep adding to all my information. So it's worked for me in the long run, and I've put that back into growing the business.
Okay. um, so I read that on Special Kids.Company allows you to bring things to the surface.
Yeah.
So what are you bringing to the surface, do you think?
It's more about the conversation around including children with special needs, so they're not hidden. It's about recognizing their contribution to their families, their society, and their community on a bigger scale. So what we see the clothing doing, sometimes, occasionally you might have a child that may not have the intellectual capability of their age. So for example, a 12-year-old might have the intellectual capability of an 18-month-old, but it doesn't mean that they need to dress like an 18-month-old child.
Right.
So it's about, and also I have had parents who say to me, well, yeah, my 12-year-old, I actually don't know how they see themselves, let alone their siblings. So a sibling would want to see their 12-year-old sibling look like a 12-year-old. So it's about bringing that out to have them, so that we look to have the clothing as age appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
So it's about bringing all that and having that conversation and recognizing them through the clothing, that they're able to feel included.
Okay. Okay. And so let's talk about that. Some of the product lines that you have out there. And just to be clear, you're not a designer. You're in terms of you making the clothes yourself, correct? You are.
No, yeah.
Right.
We do have a clothing line that is designed in-house by us. Yes.
Oh, you do, in addition to other brands that you bring in and sell.
Yes.
Okay.
So the KC range is our brand.
Okay. Okay. Very nice. And so what are some of the product lines that you're offering currently on your website?
Yeah. So in terms of the clothing, we have this very colloquial term for the children who exhibit various behaviors. We call them strippers, dippers, smearers, or shredders.
Okay.
So depending on which behavior they're exhibiting, we have a particular clothing line that we think is suitable for that child. So the KC range comes in a popper vest, a knee length zip back, and an ankle length full body suit zip back. We do have other brands that we carry. So we carry the Senan range, we carry the scratch sleeve range. So depending on that behavior, certain benefits or characteristics of those products are applicable to that particular child. So in some clothing range, if they're wanting to undress, then they need, all the garments have a 3 or 4 way stretch in them, so that gives the child the freedom, but they might have a non-woven trim, a non-stretched trim, so that they can't strip the clothing off. If they're wanting to access the diaper through the leg, you're going to need a longer leg, and so on.
So you have a product line that you create yourself, your own brand, but then how have you been able to scale in bringing in other brands, that you do sell other brands on your website?
Yeah, so I started the company 7 years ago. And the first couple of years, the main focus of the business was to put enough infrastructure and systems in place. So it was really important for us to get the products right, so the right manufacturer, the right supply chain, all of that infrastructure, as well as getting the customer service right. So we spent the first couple of years perfecting that on 1 or 2 lines. When all of those systems were in place, it was really easy then to scale the business. It was very easy to add on other products. So what happened was we let the customers tell us what we wanted. We do a lot of campaigns where we get to say to customers, well, what do you want to see next? What color do you want to see next? What add-on do you want to see next? So we've built a community around our customers who tell us what they want. We also get a lot of inquiries where people say, do you do this? And if we get asked often enough, we will then bring in another brand or another line, or we will redesign our own. Okay. So that's what we've been able to do. And it's very easy then for us to become that one-stop shop where a parent can go, yep, I need something, and they can come straight to us. And we do cater up to adults now as well.
Oh, do you?
Yes.
Okay. And what are some of the product offerings for adults?
So the clothing, because again, we've had our customers for so many years now, and the question comes up, the disability doesn't stop at age. So we then go, no problems, we'll add that into our next production. And then as demand's increased, we've then factored in the different colors as well. A lot of our wheelchair accessories for kids, for adults. Okay. We brought in brands of shoes from the US. Again, we've carried the kids and adults range.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, I've read that you always liked rooting for the underdog. Did you consider yourself to be an underdog, especially, I guess, when you were growing up in the majority Australian community in which you lived?
Yeah, I would say, given that I was in an Arab household, I'd lived in a very Australian community. So it was, like I said earlier, it just does have its challenges. Kids pick on you, you're not quite sure where you fit in and things like that. So I understood what it meant to be sort of a little bit different. And therefore I can also recognize that in other children, but also inherently in me, it's being wanting to be able to help other children and families as well, so that they all feel like it's they're part of the process. If you look at our website, whenever we do photo shoots, we always try to have the appropriate children who can represent the clothes, but we also include siblings because they can wear the clothes as well.
Okay. And then how did all of that, growing up in the Australian community, your corporate background, how did all of that just sort of provide fuel for your entrepreneurial spirit?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because when you are in a corporate world, you do have to fit into somebody else's box.
Yeah.
I do have a bit of a free spirit where I enjoy travel, meeting new people, and I think having that background in Australia and coming from 2 backgrounds does allow me to sort of understand that, but also that thirst for more information, more knowledge. But also what I did notice in the industry, it is a cottage industry. So in the past, it usually was founded by parents who had a child with special needs, and then they designed it around that child, but then weren't able to scale a business to a level where those products were accessible to everybody internationally. So I think having a multicultural background, lots of different, having traveled quite a lot, the corporate background, I thought, well, how do I reach more people so that they don't have to struggle when they're looking for products?
Yeah. And your travel, I mean, you traveling quite a lot is certainly an understatement. I read that you have traveled numerous continents. I think in the span of 1 year, you were in 3 different continents: Antarctica, Europe, and South America. Not to mention the number of countries that you visited within each continent. So, how does that reflect in what you do now? What does that bring to the table at this point?
For me, I mean, I consider my travel my expensive hobby. So it's something I've always had an interest of understanding different cultures and essentially what makes people tick. Mm-hmm. but having lived in different countries, I also understand how people shop. So, for example, in the UK, customers tend to be very loyal to one brand. In the US, there's a big focus where they're happy to just buy everything off Amazon. I mean, I've lived in the US, obviously Australia and the Middle East, and now in the UK. So just as an example, in the UK, everybody uses front loaders as washing machines, but in Australia and the US, everybody uses top loaders. Top loaders tend to wear garments out a lot more. So it's understanding how the garments wash. I think in America, you tend to bleach quite a lot of the products. So we make sure that they're bleach resistant as well. For example, generally speaking, Americans tend to think that buying outside of the US is either too expensive or take too long shipping will be too expensive or will take too long to get to the US.
Yeah.
So I used Amazon as a sales channel to reach customers quicker, because I knew that Americans had a lot of confidence in buying through Amazon. So we keep a lot of stock in our fulfillment centers in Amazon. And by doing that, I don't need to have a warehouse or a staff member in the US. I allow Amazon to do all of that. On the website, we also have a toll-free US number that customers can call on, and that then again makes it much easier, process for them to order from us. And we do have good shipping rates. They are actually very reasonable, and so we've had to educate customers over time. And we ship internationally. In fact, 60% of our sales do come from the US.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So it's that, and you said you primarily sell to the US through Amazon. What is your marketing in general, whether it's to the United States or someplace in Europe? What is your marketing strategy?
It varies. So we don't feel that we need to use fulfillment centers, obviously, in the UK. We fulfill everything from our in-house, from our own warehouse. So we use Facebook advertising sometimes, word of mouth, visiting schools, trade shows. That tends to work really well for us in the UK. For Amazon, we redirect our Facebook advertising to the Amazon listing.
Okay.
So customers who inquire, we do a lot of email marketing, and over time, actually, our customers in the US have had more and more confidence from buying directly from the website, which works out to be better for them. Yeah.
Okay. And what is your website?
It's specialkids.company. It's the whole word, specialkids.company, not .com.
Okay. All right, Sasha, thank you for interviewing with me today. It was great having you on.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Lovely to be here.
Thanks.